Daniel, will you open us up?
Lord, I thank you for this day, for giving us favorable weather and allowing us to meet here, fellowship with one another, and learn more about you. Pray, Lord, you would bless those who are sick or not feeling well or injured, Lord, or you would help them to get better and keep those who are traveling safe. I pray you just keep us all safe today, Lord. Help us to get home, bring us back safely, and you would bless the services today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Sorry, I'm usually a little more prepared. Anyway, as I'm sure everybody knows, we're in Ecclesiastes. Wrapped up with chapter 6. Ecclesiastes is largely viewed as just a philosophical book. I think there's a little bit more to it. I think that is true, but I think there's more value we can get out of it than just the last couple of verses. Solomon says a lot of things. Solomon was a wise man, the wisest man who ever lived. He also was saved. Okay. Can't be wise without being saved. He also backslid. We know that because the Bible tells us. So it's viewed that he wrote Ecclesiastes after he had repented from his ways. So he backslid, and the ways many people backslide, if he had everything and he tried everything because he was wealthy, the wealthiest man ever. God blessed him so abundantly. At one point, he went away from the Lord for a couple things, but the primary thing I think is that women took his heart away, and women have that effect on men. They can wield enormous, power in their own way. They may not be physically able to compete with most men. I'm sure there are some wimpy men out there they could probably beat. There are the exceptions on both sides, but that does not mean that women are strong physically more so than men, and that's kind of a pet peeve as you look at our modern culture. Women beating up men, and in reality, that's not an accurate thing. And it's dangerous because if you think that you can go out and then compete with somebody who's got 125 pounds on you and, a foot in height and reach and everything else, it's just dangerous. But anyway, that's a soapbox. So it's important, super important that we, as men, find the right women. It's equally important that women find the right men. But I have seen instances, thankfully not personally, where women can manipulate men into doing things they want. And that's not something that you want out of your wife. That doesn't mean that a good wife can't have a bad day or anything like that, but you don't want that to be a pattern of behavior, because that's counterproductive. In a marriage, you're supposed to be together. You should walk in unity, just like we're supposed to walk in unity with God. And if you're fighting on things, you obviously can't do that. But anyway, okay. So in chapter 7, one of the things that I'm doing as I look at all these verses is I'm trying to figure out, is this an accurate statement? Or is this string of verses, is this true or not? And is it true under the sun? Is it true for saved and unsaved? What is true? And so whether or not you view this as just now he's trying, so like Javron McGee says in this chapter, Solomon tried good works, I think. But I want to take each verse and I want to look at it, and I want to see what each verse actually says, and is it true? And then you can draw from it your own conclusions and say, yeah, this is a philosophical thing or not. But chapter 7, verse 1, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance the heart is made better. Heart of the wise is the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. So what I'm simply doing is, all right, I broke this here because it continues on and talks about fools, so I'm not saying this is necessarily the break, but I can only do so much at a time. So I'm just going to stop there. So a good name is better than precious ointment. I mean, is that a true statement? And I think it is. I think it's better to have a good name and what is precious ointment to us? I mean, is it lotion? I mean, back in the biblical times, it was obviously precious. We know that. I believe it was Mary who broke the, bottle and washed Jesus' feet with it and dried it with her hair and everything. That was a precious thing she did. So there was value. But if you don't have a good name, I every decade or so, I don't know, I get a new job. I move on. I get bored, or God's telling me to move on, or both. And the valley, we can say there's a lot of people in the valley, but there really aren't, because there's only so many people who work in this part, in this thing that you do. So you need to have a good name, because if you have a bad name, nobody's going to hire you. You're going to have to go somewhere where people don't know your name. So I think that this is a true statement. I think it's good. I think it's a true statement for the saved and the unsaved. Having a good name is important. Excuse me. The second half of this verse is the day of death is better. Going back to, because we're comparing. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. So is the day of death better than a birthday? Some might argue, no, a birthday is better because you have life and everything. And so I'm not going to, I wouldn't argue with somebody. If somebody has a different point of view on this, I can, I'm happy to listen to it, and maybe I'll change my mind. But I think that the point of this is the day of death that's the end of it for everybody. And if you go on, it's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. What's more important, to go to a funeral or to go to a wedding? My dad said once, they're going to get married with or without you, Grant. I was invited to be a groomsman. It was going to cost me a bunch of money. I had to fly out to Kentucky and be a groomsman for this guy. And I was like, I don't know if I should do this. I want to do what's right, but he's like, it's not, I'm not saying you shouldn't go to people's weddings, but I'm saying it's less important. There was a funeral that I went to when I was back in Indiana 20-some years ago. My roommate, his brother-in-law and sister, they had a child while in the Navy, and there were complications with the birth, and so the child ended up with severe difficulties. That child lived, I don't know, till 6 or roughly, and then it passed away. And they had the funeral. Now, they didn't have to have it at this time, but they had it like during the day in the middle of the week. And so almost nobody showed up. because they have jobs. So I'm not, but I actually worked for a company that was owned by Christians, and so I just took some time off, and they were okay with it, and went to the funeral. There was like half a dozen people there. There were not very many. And this was in a church. The church that this was held in, the church that they went to, was about 200 people. So it really kind of surprised me that I don't know that I ever even saw that child. I barely knew the guy, but he was close to, my roommate who I was close to knew him, and therefore I went to that funeral, and that mattered to them. Who wants to have a funeral and have nobody show up? People are always curious, oh, what would my funeral be like? Not everybody, but some people. But I think it is better to go to the house of mourning. People avoid sorrow at all costs. I mean, I get it. I'm the same way. If I'm struggling in my life in whatever way and I'm not close to God, I don't want to go to church, because you know what? I feel bad because I know I'm not living right. It is truly something that makes you reflect upon yourself. People go to funerals and everybody there can't help but reflect on, what happens when they die. You're faced with your mortality. And that's also, it's a great time. You have to be sensitive, but it's a great time to get the gospel out. If we can have pastor, like Pastor Hensley did some funerals, if he can preach the gospel to a bunch of unsaved people, that's great. They've at least heard it. So I think that's what I am understanding this to mean. It is in verse 2, it says, that is the end of all men, and the living will lay it to his heart. So the people that are still alive are going, it's going to affect them some. I mean, I'm usually not very affected by things, but there was a guy I had talked to like a week prior, maybe it was 2 weeks. This was at my last job. I didn't know him really well, but he was a very friendly guy, and I knew his name and whatnot, and he had some health problems, and he died. And it was just like, I just was talking to him at work. It's just a weird feeling sometimes. It's like he just died. Pastor Hensley just died. We surely didn't expect that to happen. So it forces you, and that's why I think the reason people say, you gotta grieve, and us guys, we try to take our feelings and push them down and, lock them, because sometimes you just don't have time to grieve. If you're in the military or something, you're in combat, your friend gets killed, you don't have time to grieve. But it is important to grieve. It's important to reflect on the meaning of life and what we're put on this earth for. Everybody needs to do it, and we have the answer. And so we need to be prepared to give the answer when people come to us, because they will at some point. Somebody will. Deuteronomy 32:29 says, "Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this. Oh, that they would consider their latter end." Need to consider the end. I like the statement that, this is, the death of the body is the only death that we'll ever know. But for the saved person, but for the unsaved person, this is the only life they'll ever know. They have two deaths, and we have two births. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by the sadness of the countenance of the heart is made better. So let's talk about laughter here. So is laughter bad? No, obviously, laughter isn't bad in and of itself. Laughter's, the best medicine, right? Laughter's good. Laughter helps cheer you up. I'm a grumpy guy, and sometimes I'll go and I'll try to find a stand-up comedian, a clean one, or lots of them are, and they'll, it makes me happier, it cheers me up. So, that can be a good thing. It's a tool. You can use it as a tool. But people laugh at all sorts of stuff. People laugh when they're just sometimes surprised. They're not necessarily amused. Laughter is an interesting reaction. But in this case, I think they're mostly talking about in verse 4, it says, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of the fools is in the house of mirth. In fact, we're talking about just like cackling laughter, just never being serious, always foolish, and it's one of the hallmarks of the fool is they're always joking around, or they're playing pranks, or they're doing things. It is something that, while laughter is not bad, in this case, laughter is bad, because you need to be able to be, you should rejoice with those who rejoice, but you should grieve with those that grieve. You should not always be laughing, and the fool is in that case. So the other verse I wanted to mention here, was Numbers 23:10. Who can count the dust of Jacob and the number of the fourth part of Israel? Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my last end be like his. So the latter end. Psalm 126, 5-6 says, they that sow in tears shall reap in joy. He that goeth forth in weeping, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. Well, it's not that we can't laugh, but it is important that we grieve. We grieve those, when I hear somebody's getting a divorce, I grieve that. It grieves me. Annoyingly, I pray about it, but it's one of those things where it seems like the prayers don't matter. They do, but people have their own will, and people usually who are getting divorced or determined, that's what they're going to do. And it's very difficult to change them. But it's one of the things about grieving is it helps us care for people. If you're grieving for somebody, that should help you pray for them because you care about them. And this world, that's a challenge. I mean, if you're praying for people and you don't really care, I don't think a very effective prayer. I struggle with praying for people I don't know. But if I know, I'll pray for people I don't know. Usually I'm given some sort of context. And so I think God honors that. But if it's kind of a generic prayer, pray for so-and-so. Well, what's so-and-so's need? Where is he struggling? And then it's good to get updates occasionally. Sometimes it's a constant thing, though. I always have prayers for my health and my work. Well, guess what? Those prayers been on there for, 12 years. Every time I've been thinking about taking it off, I have another problem with one or the other, or both. So, but sorrow is better, I believe. I think that godly sorrow, especially, I think worldly sorrow is not. Worldly sorrow drives people to suicide, like Judas. Godly sorrow brings us to repentance. So that is my interpretation of what Solomon is saying here. But even if it's not necessarily talking to the wise, I think to the saved, I think these people I think these are still wise comments and valid comments. Verse 5 says, "It is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fool. This is also vanity." So continuing on with talking about fools, so this connects back to the previous section. So it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise. Where have we heard that before? We've heard that in Proverbs. Proverbs 9, 8-9. "Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Give instructions to a wise man, and he will be yet wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning." Let's go to Daniel 5. I want to talk about Belshazzar for a minute. So 5 verse 1, "Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, while he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the golden and silver vessels, which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of God, which was at Jerusalem. And the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine, praised the gods of gold, and of silver, and of brass, of iron, of wood, of stone," all of which completely inanimate. But most of us know what happens next. I mean, first of all, they're being attacked. The city's being besieged. And then they completely spit in God's face in the process. So this mirth was turned to sorrow by what happened next. And this is, I don't want to take the time to go into it, although it's a great story. I would, read it again on your own time. But we had the writing on the wall, and many tekel uparsin, and they didn't know what it meant because it had two meanings, right? One in Chaldean and one in Hebrew. So, but Daniel, sorry. Let's start with a D. Daniel was around, and so they had him come, and he knew both languages, so he was able to tell them what the prophecy was, which came true pretty much in that night. Was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain. I feel like it would be remiss if I didn't go over what the prophecy was. This is the interpretation of the thing, meaning, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but meaning God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Paris, the kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. That is the crackling of thorns under a pot, the laughter of the fool, and the vanity. The crackling of thorns is actually mentioned, or thorns under a fire is mentioned, a decent number of times in the Bible. I didn't count them up, and it just means fire of thorns is an image of something that burns quickly, fiercely, and then dies out just as fast. And that's the way things are. My mom used the term flash in the pan once, and I didn't know what that meant. And so I asked. It was just basically something that kind of just did a flash. I don't know if that was from maybe shooting, because there was a pan on the old like flintlocks or something, and they put gunpowder, and then when that got hit and it exploded, it might be from that, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. The point of the matter is it's quick, it's bright, it's probably loud, and then it goes away. My mom said that about Rush Limbaugh. That was a long time ago. And she was wrong. She was very wrong. I love my mom, but she was wrong. In my experience, women did not like Rush Limbaugh. Like, I had more fights with women, older women. I was a kid, and I liked Rush Limbaugh, and I got yelled at by women. So the crackling of thorns under a pot, the laughter of fools, it's all vanity. None of that stuff matters. You go to a party, you have fun instead of going to a funeral or whatever. I mean, you'll forget. You forget all those times. It's all vanity. It's empty. You're just passing time. You're trying to have fun, and you're passing time, and there's no meaning to it. The unsaved see this all the time. I used to wonder, like, if you get married to somebody, that she's supposed to be, that your spouse is supposed to be your number one concern on this earth. Okay, God comes first, but then our spouse comes second. Our children and family come like third, and everybody else, whatever. But I have noticed in the world under the sun, the people don't do that. And especially there's lots of second wives or whatnot. I'm still on my first. Hopefully that'll never change. But if you, my sister, and I love her, and she's saved, she had some children. The children were being disrespectful to her. She had gotten remarried, and her new husband yelled at the boy, and he was not a young child, might have even been an adult, I don't know exactly, and because he was being incredibly disrespectful to her. What was her response? Was it to say, "Thank you, husband, for backing me up"? No. It was engage mama bear mode, right? Mama bear mode is great if you're fighting off murderers or something like that, wild Indians that are gonna kill you and your baby. That's great. But if you're attacking your husband because he is doing what he's supposed to do, which is make sure your wife is respected and treated, loved. I tell you what, man, I don't think anything makes me angrier than when somebody mistreats my wife. Like, it's making me angry now just to remember sometimes. And so that kind of moves us on to the next section a little bit. Surely, verse 7, surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. Better is the end of a thing than the beginning thereof, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bosom of fools. So that's kind of what I was thinking about, but we'll go through it one by one. So, surely oppression maketh a wise man mad, and a gift destroyeth the heart. And when I look at this, I'm like, is this a regular, what do we mean by wise man? Is this a godly wise man or a worldly wise man? And I don't know, but I think that it works either way. And so as a Christian, I think that this can apply to us. Surely oppression maketh a wise man mad. So what do we mean by that? Oppression. It's it's talking about injury or trials. You can have a wise man, put him under enough stress, he will eventually break. You can have the best, toughest Delta Force guy, or Navy SEAL Team 6 guy, or whatever, who's gone under training to resist interrogation, but they all say that they will eventually break. And so you can have something that can push you to your limits. Now, as Christians, God says he won't push us. He won't give us too much. Although sometimes it's like he pushes you right up to the edge. One comment that this may possibly be, this oppression may be driven by the fools that were mentioned before. I mean, fools can definitely make you feel oppressed. I've had some experience with fools in work who aggressively do things that are harmful. And it has been a great challenge, but it's one of those things that can help you grow your faith. I try to look at everything in life as something to help me grow my faith, but I'm a pretty easily discouraged guy. I'm not naturally upbeat. So it can definitely, be a challenge for me at times, but, it's one of the reasons why it's important to have godly friends and people that will pray for you and, who care about you. It's one of the things that, helps motivate me in my prayer life as I think about these people who have going through trials, and some of my trials remind me of what they're going through. So sometimes I'm able to share that, but sometimes I'm not, but I'm able to, at the very least, pray for them, I think, more effectively. I like to pray specifically and, earnestly. It's a challenge at times because sometimes I'm really, really tired. If it's in the morning, and that's usually when I try to pray, I don't wake up very well. So it can be very challenging, and I don't do as good as I would like to. But I do care about people, and I want them to have good things. I want them to grow. Whether it's my children or other young people in church, or, even those that are older, it's important that we, have a good end. And that might sound morbid, but, this whole thing is, it's a race. I mean, who are we racing against? We're not really racing against anybody, but we need to finish it. And so we need to, why do I bring that up? It's because it's something that has occurred to me more recently, that you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, no matter how discouraged or frustrated or oppressed you might feel. God will take us through some really challenging times, and sometimes it doesn't feel like he's there. I think that Footprints in the Sand poem is a pretty good illustration of it. But life can really be a challenge, and that's why it's important to be for other people, especially in their time of sorrow. Back to verse 7, the second half says, "A gift destroyeth the heart." When gift is used in the Bible, it usually means bribe. I don't know that it always does, but at least in the Old Testament, that frequently seems to be the meaning. Proverbs 17:23 says, "A wicked man taketh a gift out of the bosom to pervert the ways of judgment." In my company, we have pretty strict standards, but I think that they uphold them more than probably a lot of companies that also maybe have strict standards. But we're not allowed to have anything that's over $100 in any way, shape, or form. So they can take, vendor can take you out to dinner, and that's about it. And why is that? Because a gift, if a bribe, because that's what that stuff is. Everybody knows it. Sales guys have expense accounts, so they can take their clients out to dinner. They're trying to bribe you, although that's not necessarily effective. But when but a gift or a bribe can definitely corrupt. It's just like, hey, I want a little extra consideration. I'm not asking for you to, throw the race or take a dive in a boxing match. I'm just asking you to be like, hey, take a look at this situation again, maybe from a different angle or something. So a gift can corrupt, usually does corrupt, and destroys the heart, puts the wrong thing there. Instead of having the right motives, you've replaced it with money. I think that's a lot of what we're seeing in our politics today, is that there is a huge amount of graft going on, which we don't really use that term anymore, but politicians are enriching themselves like crazy. It's insane. Some of the stories I've heard recently that are factual. People get into Congress, get some insider knowledge, go and do things. It can be very discouraging once again, but that's where use John 16 or 6:13, I think. That's Christ says that in these things that he has spoken unto us that and then in this world we shall have tribulation, but to be of good cheer, to be of good cheer, he has overcome the world. We have to remember that and not focus on all the negative stuff. So let's see, the last verse I think I will finish with is, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry, for anger resteth in the bottom of the fools. Or bosom, sorry. When I read McGee's commentaries, he says that his description on this, I don't understand, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on him, but this is, I think, a biblical principle. I mean, there's Proverbs 14:17, he that is soon angry dealeth foolishly, and a man of wicked devices is hated. So I think this is an obvious statement. I don't think there's anything hidden here. I think that you can go out and drive to Boise and somebody's probably going to get mad at you or you're going to get mad at them. In my case, I usually get mad at other people and then I probably make them mad at me. But we should be able to have control over our own spirit and to be patient is better than the proud in spirit. And that's, we deal with the anger and the pride, and the anger comes from pride, right? Why do people get so mad about stuff? It's because they think this shouldn't be happening to them. They're special. I mean, I get annoyed if a waitress or whatever, waiter, doesn't refill my drink because I'm a very thirsty guy. And I get annoyed, but that's because I feel entitled. Well, is there some validity to that? Sure, that's, they're supposed to do that. But it's also my pride that's the source of the anger. They're not doing their job, how dare they? So, pride is a very dangerous thing and can drive us to make a lot of mistakes. And that's why we have to be so careful. Brother Mike told about that time in Australia, and it's like he was mad, but he, you know, his brain was still going. And somebody commented to him that if it'd been them, that person would have been laid out on the ground. It's like, well, I mean, maybe, I guess if you're a really good fighter, but how do you know they're going to be the one on the ground? I've only been in one fight in my life. It was kind of a funny, very short little fight. Other than my brothers, I mean, we fought all the time, but that doesn't count. I had one fight playing basketball when I was a kid, probably like 10 or 12. And there was a girl on my team, and one of the guys shoved the girl. And I was like, I don't know. I've always been a chivalrous guy and defensive, you know, towards women and protective. And maybe, you know, for some women that's annoying. But this guy shoved her. She was on my team, and a friend of mine, I shoved him. And then the guy who was leading that guy's team, you know, threw a punch at me. But I was taller and had a longer reach, so he got the worst of it. So it's just, you know, a funny little thing, but it's you know, be not hasty in thy spirit to be angry. You know, what would I say that we, you know, could leave here with, you can apply in your life? You know, apply that and watch your pride and identify your, try to take a moment and figure out if you struggle with anger, and even some women have this issue, figure out what triggers you. I don't like that word, but I haven't found a better one. What triggers you? If you're a mama bear that's going to take off your husband's head because he said something, he yelled at your kid, well, maybe you examine that. You know, if you're driving and you're aggressive and you don't like how fast people are going, which I feel that way all the time when I drive, you know, be aware of that. And always try to, you know, give other people grace. Nobody knows the exact situation that person's in, but we always seem to assume the worst. Anyway, I will pray to dismiss. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for bringing us here. Just thank you for all the blessings you bestowed upon us each and every day, Lord. We are able to get up, get out of bed, and that's a blessing on its own. I don't say that in a facetious way, Lord. I thank you for just helping us to do the things that we need to do, Lord, to come here and to worship you and to fellowship with one another. And I just pray that you would bless the services today, that you would bless Pastor Rue as he speaks to us. Bless the song service and with Daniel and probably Rebecca. I just pray that you would help all of us to just worship you in this time, to bow down and just praise your name, to not just have the words of the songs be vain repetition. And I pray for those who are traveling or unable to be here for whatever reason. I just pray that you would